So this afternoon, we are here for briefing from the policy committee or policy coordinating committee responsible for agriculture on behalf of the New Patriotic Party. Those matters that really needs discussions, that needs attention, that the ordinary Ghanaian needs to understand, has to be given much attention to. So on behalf of the chairman of the policy coordinating committee and on behalf of the New Patriotic Party leadership, I humbly invite the chairman or the co-chairman of the Agric Policy Committee to take us through the press engagement this afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The New Patriotic Party has invited you here to place on record our serious concerns regarding the Cocoa Board Bill 2026, which was passed by Parliament of Ghana in the last week of July 2026 under certificates of urgency. Let us begin by stating our position plainly so that it is not misinterpreted. The New Patriotic Party does not oppose reform of the cocoa sector. We accept that the Ghana Cocoa Board Act 1984, PNDC Law 81, is a product of a different constitutional era and is overdue for replacement. We support traceability. We support value addition. We support a legally guaranteed floor for the farmers' share of export earnings. Our objection is not to the destination. It is to the manner of travel and to specific provisions which, in their present form, will hurt the very farmers we claim to protect. A good cause has been undone by a bad process. Ladies and gentlemen, no legislation passed by this Parliament in 2026 touches more Ghanaian households than this one. Approximately 800,000 farming households cultivate cocoa across 10 of Ghana's 16 regions. Counting dependents, the sector sustains an estimated 3 million Ghanaians, close to 1 in 10 of the population. Cocoa generates in the order of 2 billion in foreign exchange in a normal season, making it Ghana's second largest export earner after gold. Cocoa revenue have historically financed cocoa roads, scholarships, clinics, and mass spraying across the cocoa belt. Without doubt, therefore, the sector we are legislating today is confronted with some significant challenges. One, national output dropped from a record 1.047 million metric tons in the 2020-21 season to roughly 530,000 tons in 2023-24 as a result of the El Nino and other factors before a partial recovery to around 600,000 metric tons. Cocoa Board itself now projects a fall of approximately 16% in the output for the 2026-2027 season, citing adverse weather, cocoa swelling shoot virus disease, and the encroachment of illegal mining. This is the context. A sector under such challenges cannot afford legislation drafted in haste. The cost of getting this bill wrong will not be borne in Accra. It will be borne in Serioso, Offenso, Asimfosu, Goso, Asenkregwa, Nkoko, Enchi, Nyinahini, Mansum, Adubia, and indeed across the 10 cocoa growing regions. Ladies and gentlemen, the bill was laid in Parliament on Tuesday, 28 July 2026 by the Deputy Minister for Finance and passed within the same week under a certificate of urgency pursuant to Article 106(13) of the 1992 Constitution. A bill that repeals PNDC Law 81 in its entirety. A bill that legislates the governance of an entire industry. A bill that creates a new tribunal. A bill that establishes new criminal offenses was disposed of in a matter of days. We do not say that a certificate of urgency is unconstitutional. It is constitutional. What we are saying is that its use must be proportionate to the case for urgency, and that the case advanced here that the 2026-27 pricing window opens in September does not justify for closing consultation on a law of this permanence. The pricing window recurs every year. This law will govern the sector for generation. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, the majority has asserted that a consultant toured the country and gathered stakeholder views. If that is so, the record should show. It doesn't. Indeed, no stakeholder engagement report was laid or made available to the Joint Finance, Agriculture, and Constitutional and Legal Committee when it sat to determine the urgency of the bill. Neither the Ghana National Cocoa Farmers Association nor the Ghana Best Cocoa Farmers Association was consulted in the preparation of this bill. The concerns raised by the Licensed Cocoa Buying Association of Ghana, that is LICOBAC, were neither consulted nor incorporated. The Cocoa Hauliers Association, the operators who physically moved the crop from the shed to the port, was not consulted at all. It also bears noting that the bill laid in 2026 is substantially different from the Ghana Cocoa Board Amendment Bill laid in 2025 and reviewed in committee. Provisions were substantially rewritten and expanded. Members were therefore asked to pass at speed a test that no stakeholder had scrutinized in its final form. Ladies and gentlemen, a significant number of clauses in this bill require further consideration if the legitimate fears of farmers, licensed buying companies, hauliers, and the wider public are to be allayed. We highlight 6. Clause 4, that is a restriction on the mandates of Cocoa Board. Clause 4A, ladies and gentlemen, is sound. It bars Cocoa Board from undertaking any activity, program, or obligation not directly connected to the regulation, development, marketing, quality assurance, traceability, pricing, or export of cocoa. That is precisely the discipline the institution has lacked, and its response directly to years of legitimate public criticism about mandate creep. Clause 4B, however, undoes it. It bars Cocoa Board from assuming responsibilities properly belonging to another ministry, department, or agency, unless expressly authorized by an enactment or with the prior approval of the minister, acting in consultation with relevant authorities. That final limb is the loophole. A statutory restriction that can be lifted by ministerial approval is not a restriction. It is a mere formality. Ladies and gentlemen, come with me to clause 57, the cocoa pricing formula. Clause 57.3 says, and I quote, the producer price for a crop season shall not be less than 70% of the gross free on board price realized by the Cocoa Board for that crop season, unquote. We welcome the principle of a statutory floor but we must ask the question that every farmer is asking. 70% of what? And who verifies that 70%? Note, first of all, there was a change in the language. The earlier rendition referred to the world market price of cocoa. The enacted text refers to the gross free on-board price realized by a cocoa board. These are not the same thing. The world market price is observable on the ICE exchange by anyone with a terminal. The realized gross FOB is an internally computed figure blended across forward contracts, sold at prices fixed months or seasons earlier, and known with certainty only to cocoa board. Pegging farmers' statutory entitlement to a denominator that only one party can calculate and that no farmer can independently verify is not a guarantee. It is a promise with the arithmetic withheld. Government must therefore state clearly, would the realized gross FOB computation and the contract underlying it be published each season? Would the producer price review committees working be open to independent audits? Will farmers' representative and civil society have sight of the numbers before the price is announced? Now let us go to clause 59, categories of license. Clause 59.1 provides for licenses across a range of activities. Every activity listed at subclauses A, B, C, and D is already carried out by the private sector. The single exception is the activity at subclause E, and that is the export and internal and external marketing of cocoa, which is at present the exclusive preserve of the Cocoa Marketing Company, a wholly owned subsidiary of Cocoa Board. The inclusion of external marketing is a licensing regime carries an unmistakable implication. That is, the government intends in time to open external marketing to private licensees. Government must come clear on this because we do not believe it is in the supreme interest of the nation. Ghana's single greatest structural advantage in the global cocoa market is that we sell as one seller. Centralized external marketing through CMC is what underpins our forward sales program, our price stabilization reserve, our quality premium, and critically, our ability to negotiate jointly with Cote d'Ivoire, as we did in securing the living income differential. Fragment that seller, and we surrender the only leverage a producing country has. This is not a hypothetical concern. Under the Cocoa Sector Strategy 1, an NDC administration pursued a policy of partial liberalization of external marketing that would have permitted qualifying LBCs, including cash flow, to export 30% of their purchases. It took the intervention of the J.A. Kufuor administration in 2001 to halt that policy. We are entitled to ask whether Clause 59 is that same policy returning through licensing door. Now, Clause 81, prohibited activities on protected farms. Clause 81 says, and I quote, "A person shall not destroy, uproot, damage, or fell a cocoa tree except for the purpose of rehabilitation approved by Cocoa Board," unquote. The policy intention here to stop the conversion of cocoa farms to galamsey pits and estate plots is one we share entirely. The drafting, however, is indiscriminate. As it stands, this provision criminalizes ordinary good husbandry. Anyone who understands how cocoa is actually cultivated will recognize this problem immediately. On a properly managed farm, trees are removed as a matter of routine agronomic practice. Under Clause 81A, as drafted, a farmer cannot remove a cocoa tree by way of thinning. A farmer cannot fell an unproductive moribund tree in course of pruning and replacement. A farmer cannot cut a tree infected with cocoa swollen shoot virus disease. That very action Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana and Cocoa Board own protocol require urgent to arrest the spread of the disease unless and until approval has first been obtained from Cocoa Board. The clause has further consequences that appears not to have been considered. A farmer who no longer wishes to farm cocoa must apply to Cocoa Board and await approval before repurposing his or her own land. A farmer whose land can no longer support cocoa because of shifting rainfall patterns, soil exhaustion, or any other cause must likewise obtain Cocoa Board's approval before switching to other crops. These are significant encumbrances on private property rights imposed without compensation and without any stated timelines within which Cocoa Board must respond to an application. It is our considered analysis that this provision is unenforceable as drafted and will lend itself to abuse, to arbitrary arrest, to extortion at the farm gates, and to the harassment of an already struggling farming population. We say this against a background in which we are already witnessing the abuse of Section 207 and 208 of the Criminal Offences Act, 1960, Act 29, the imposition of erroneous bail conditions on citizens for exercise of free speech, and the weaponization of the courts against political opponents. We have no confidence that cocoa farmers will be spared. Now let us go to Clause 85, registration of farmers and farms. Clause 85.1 requires every farmer and every farm cultivating cocoa to be registered under the cocoa management system and assigned a unique identification number. Clause 85.2 then prohibits any person from engaging in a commercial production, purchase, or sale of cocoa unless both the person and the farm are so registered. The consequences is severe and we believe unintended. Any farmer not captured on the cocoa management system is placed outside the law and may not lawfully sell the crop he or she has cultivated. Now consider the state of the register. Registration under the cocoa management system began in 2019, that is 7 years ago. As at the last check, some 792,952 farmers had been registered and about 1.2 million hectares mapped, against an estimated 100,000 farming households and roughly 1.27 million hectares under harvest. This is a substantial progress, but it is not complete coverage. And Cocoa Board has itself acknowledged continuing difficulties in the field, including the absence of internet connectivity in some communities. The critical point is this: farmers do not register themselves. Registration is the responsibility of Cocoa Board. A farmer who has not been rigged by an enumerator has committed no default, yet under clause 85(2), it is the farmer, not Cocoa Board, who bears the legal consequences of that omission. Now, clause 106, local processing threshold. Clause 106(2) says, and I quote, "The regulations shall provide for a minimum local processing threshold, which shall not be less than 50% of the total cocoa beans produced in the country to be achieved within a transitional period," unquote. The NPP has consistently championed domestic value addition, and we do so still. Ghana exports raw beans and imports chocolate. That must change. But an ambition is not a plan, and this clause does not answer the question on which the entire policy turns. The binding constraint on local processing in Ghana is not factory capacity. It is the price at which beans are made available to processors. We already have the factories. They stand idle for want of affordable beans. Under the existing arrangement, local processors face no restriction on the quantity of main crop bean they may purchase. In other words, if you are a local processor and you want to buy cocoa beans, the main crop bean, nothing prevents you from buying any quantity that you want to buy. So the impression out there that cocoa beans are not made available to the local processing companies is not entirely true. Light crop beans are sold to local processors at a discount of some 20%, but main crop sales attract the same FOB price as external sales. So government must come clear and answer directly. At what price will main crop beans be sold to local processors under this threshold? If a discount is to be applied, who absorbs it? Is it Cocoa Board's balance sheet, the consolidated fund, or the farmer's 70% floor? How is a discount to local processors to be reconciled with clause 57(3), given that a discounted domestic sale necessarily reduces the realized gross FOB against which the farmer's statutory minimum is calculated? Ladies and gentlemen, a statutory floor price is only as good as the willingness of a government to honor it. And on that question, this administration's record is in a single season speaks for itself. If you remember, in August 2025, when the season opened, the finance minister announced a producer price of 51,660 cedis per ton. That translates to 3,228 cedis, 75 pesos per 64 kilos of bag. This was announced as 70% of a gross FOB of $7,200 per ton. In October 2025, after Cote d'Ivoire set a price of some 20% above that of Ghana, the Producer Price Review Committee raised the price to 58,000 cedis per ton. Again, that translated into 3,625 per bag. In February, that's February 12, 2026, mid-season, the Producer Price Review Committee reduced the producer price to 41,392 per ton, and that is 2,587 cedis per bag, a reduction of 28.6%. imposed on farmers who had already planted, farmers who had already sprayed, farmers who had already hired labor, and farmers who had already harvested on the strength of the announced price. Then in February 2026, farmers picketed at Cocoa Board headquarters in Accra and also marched in Sehuyoso. As you remember, arrears owned across the chain exceeded over 10 billion. In June 2026, the price was held at 2,587 for the light crop season, and farmers in several districts reported waiting up to 6 months for payment. You all know what happened in the Oti region. I don't know whether you were following. The farmers in the Oti region demonstrated at Hohoi that they have not been paid for several months. So let us be precise with what happened in February. A farmer in Sehuyoso lost 1,038 cedis on every bag of cocoa. We are talking about income already committed to school fees. We are talking about income already committed to labor hired by the farmer. And we are talking about inputs already bought by the farmer on credit. This was not a forecast that failed. It was a price that had been announced, relied upon, and then withdrawn mid-season. It is against that record that farmers now ask to accept a statutory guarantee of 70% of a figure that only Cocoa Board can calculate. Their skepticism is not partisan, it is earned. We therefore say two things to Ghana's cocoa farmers today, and we say them without qualification. One, the new patriotic party, together with industry stakeholders and civil society, will monitor the implementation of Clause 57 closely, season by season, and will demand publication on the workings behind every producer price announcement. Two, the next NPP administration, under Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, will not reduce the producer price of cocoa mid-season once it has been announced. A price announced to the Ghanaian farmer will be price honored to the Ghanaian farmer. I'll take the second one again. The next NPP administration, under Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, will not reduce the producer price of cocoa mid-season once it has been announced. A price announced to the Ghanaian farmer will be a price honored to the Ghanaian farmer. Ladies and gentlemen, given the strategic importance of the cocoa sector to the national economy, the new patriotic party respectfully makes the following demands. One, we urge His Excellency the President to withdraw assent to the Ghana Cocoa Bill 2026 and return same to Parliament for broader stakeholder consultation. We also ask Parliament to remove or substantially narrow the ministerial exception in Clause 4B so that any expansion of Cocoa Board's mandate requires an enactment. We also ask Parliament to clarify on the face of the bill that external marketing of cocoa remains vested in the Cocoa Marketing Company, or state expressly the government's intention regarding Clause 59(1)(e). We also ask Parliament to amend Clause 81 to exempt removals carried out in accordance with Cocoa Board's published agronomic guidelines and confine the prior approval requirements to conversions of cocoa farms to non-cocoa use. We also ask Parliament to defer the commencement of Clause 85(2) until registration under the cocoa management system is certified by Parliament as substantially complete and provide a free farmer-initiated registration routine. To the stakeholder and civil society, we call on the licensed cocoa buying companies, the Licensed Cocoa Buying Association of Ghana, the Cocoa Farmers Associations, the Cocoa Hauliers Association, the domestic processors, and the civil society organizations working in this space to place their positions formally on the public record and to insist on transparency in the technical workings that determine the farmer's price. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen of the press, Ghana's cocoa industry was not built in a single parliament, and it will not be repaired in a single week. It was built over a century by smallholder families who took the risk of planting a tree that will not bear for 5 years. They are owned better than a law made in haste about their livelihoods in their absence. We say again, the NPP supports sector reform. We support traceability, value addition, and guaranteed floor for the farmer. What we cannot support is a test that criminalizes cocoa husbandry, that criminalizes farmers for Cocoa Board's own registration backlog, that leaves the door open to the fragmentation of external marketing, and that ties the farmer's entitlement to a figure no farmer can verify. Return the bill, consult the farmer, fix the clauses, then pass a law the whole industry can stand behind. As it stands, major provisions in the new Cocoa Board law will hurt cocoa farmers. Thank you for your attention. Yo, Central for ne adofo ayeshia.